Oh, Superior Spider-Man, you're insane! Oh hi, didn't see you there in this clearly scripted intro. I was just going through one of my old comic books. Superheroes have been super popular lately, and I figured, why not make a video on my favorite one?
I'm only about toe deep into the comic book world, but Spider-Man's always been one of my favorites. First superhero, Spider-Man. First VHS I ever asked for, Spider-Man the Hobgoblin. First superhero video game, Superman 64, but I have it on good authority that that is not a video game, so let's pretend it never happened. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions was made by Beanox, and it came out during Batman Arkham Asylum's Rise to Glory, and while it isn't the best superhero game out there, it's certainly one of the more interesting ones. Now, every superhero game has an excuse built in order for it to exist. I think in most cases, we just refer to this as a story. The story in Shattered Dimensions starts just before an altercation between our hero himself and Mysterio that shatters the tablet of order and chaos. MacGuffin! Fragments of the tablet then scatter across New York and 3 other dimensions, each with its own Spider-Man, and with the help of Madam Web, it's up to the 4 spiders to recover all the pieces. On the surface, this is already a great setup for a video game, but it works on a metatextual level that makes it even better. Metatextual even a word? Each Spider-Man was played by a different actor that's portrayed Spider-Man before. Josh Keaton, who played Spider-Man in The Spectacular Spider-Man, is Ultimate Spider-Man. Neil Patrick Harris is The Amazing Spider-Man and was Spider-Man in the CGI animated Spider-Man series. Christopher Daniel Barnes, the Spider-Man from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, plays Spider-Man Noir. And Dan Gilvezan plays Spider-Man 2099, and of the group is the earliest voice of Spider-Man from his performance in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Iceman and Firestar.
Yeah, that one. And it doesn't stop there. A bunch of people that were villains and side characters from previous Spider-Man cartoons and video games were back to provide voices for the villains and side characters in the game. So it's a game about multiple Spider-Mans working together to stop their iconic villains from different dimensions, but it's also actually different Spider-Mans working together against familiar foes from different publications. Spider-Man, 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 Spider-Man. Can someone please do me a favor and find out what the correct plural for multiple spider people is? Spider-Mans, Spider-Men, Spider-Folk? Spider-Folk sounds like a weird sexual thing. What's great is how each Spider-Man manages to be a little different despite technically being the same person, and their difference is reflected in the gameplay. You could say that they're, multi-dimensional. They're all the witty smartass that you would expect a Spider-Man to be, but Noir is a lot more sarcastic than the other 3.
Goblin says the spider's coming after the tablet, and he wants all measures taken to stop him getting it.
I'm flattered.
He's got a darker personality, and it matches up well with the way he fights in the shadows. 2099 is more of an intellectual and is less impulsive than the other Spider-Men, and his accelerated vision in combat allows him the extra moments he needs to put his brain to work. Ultimate Universe Spider-Man is younger, more headstrong, and short of temper. In the black suit, his rage mode allows him to break out into a roaring frenzy and deal with armies of opponents. He's also hands down the funniest.
I have become a being of pure energy, without pants!
Amazing Spider-Man is Spider-Man? He's the original. He's the vanilla of Spider-Man ice cream flavors, so he's got nothing. But where Noir takes more damage and Ultimate's combat style sacrifices mobility for range, Amazing is the most balanced of the 4, providing a little bit of everything without any special skills. Each Spider-Man has 3 levels to complete, but let me ask you a question. How many Spider-Men does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one, but they're all gonna do it anyway. That might not have been the idea at first, because the 4 beginning levels do their best to highlight each Spider-Man's abilities and play like they're designed to focus on different kinds of gameplay. Amazing's level has a big emphasis on platforming, Noir's level is essentially the Arkham Asylum stealth gameplay but with Spider-Man powers, 2099's is an action set piece focused on chasing a boss through an entire level and having multiple fights with them, and Ultimate's has a strong emphasis on combat, completing things within time limits, and reminds me of the hack and slash of God of War. What you realize in hindsight is that these levels are just showcasing the stuff you'll do. Rescue civilians, have quick time battles against bosses, fight the same 3 enemies that change the costume they're wearing to fit the dimension you're in. I call this stuff because instead of having a level with a unique focus built around the Spider-Man you're playing as, you have generic objectives that you have to satisfy in almost every level. That's not to say there aren't sequences specific to a certain Spider-Man. Noir is the only one with stealth mechanics, and 2099 is the only Spider-Man with whatever this is, this falling minigame. What starts off as an interesting idea slowly becomes a practice and repetition that you could have just done with one Spider-Man. And neither is that to say that the repetition is boring. No, in fact, I had fun doing it. It's just not the expectation that you're set up with at the beginning. I thought I was going to get 4 little games inside a bigger game. Instead, I got really intense grocery shopping. And that's when Shattered Dimensions starts to fracture. Right around when you get past those first 4 levels. Not because it's poorly made, but because it neglects the interesting things about it to focus on the boring things about it. Take the combat, for instance. Being able to unlock new combos for all the spiders by earning spider essence when you beat enemies or find collectibles. Those new combos behaving differently for each Spider-Man, and in some cases being exclusive to a Spider-Man on top of whatever special skill they have? Interesting. None of the combos being able to break an enemy's guard and having to throw out more than half of your move list because the only thing that breaks guards is an air launcher? Boring. Having Spidey Sense be a mechanic to detect different kinds of special attacks? Interesting. Spidey Sense being able to detect things so early that you can avoid attacks before the animations play? Not having a dedicated counter button for moments where Spider-Man can easily counter Spidey Sensed attacks? Boring! Being able to leap and bound over enemies to get behind them or line them up for a big heavy combo? Interesting and clever. Those leaps and bounds putting Spider-Man too far from his enemies to deal out a full combo before the enemy reorients themselves? Boring and stupid. Now here's a bunch of enemies that will force you to do the boring things, and here's 3 more electricians you have to save so they can turn Doc Ock's giant purple vibrator off. And let's not forget that one of the most important things you need to get right in a Spider-Man game is the web swinging. Oh my god, the web swinging. I've been called a straight shooter before, but I don't think this is what they meant. This is a new form of planking only the Spider-Man can do. It's called spanking. Ooh, that's an unfortunate name for that. Just kidding, the web swinging is fine. Spidey can do a web boost that slingshots him upward, he can zipline to ledges and crawlable surfaces, and he can do the traditional web swinging we all know and love, as long as you're in an area that it's allowed, you're not too high up in the air, and you've waited the mandatory 2 seconds before you're allowed to swing again. Those first 2 restrictions are understandable. You don't want people falling out of the level or seeing the edge of your skybox or any potentially game-breaking thing. But the delay on web swinging and web boosting is the sole reason for all of my deaths in the game. Considering that there's a failsafe QTE when you fall too low, you'd be surprised how many times that prompt just doesn't show up for whatever reason. There are so many restrictions on web swinging, and every level is more or less point A to point B that you barely ever get the chance to enjoy it. You're going to be doing most of your web swinging in a circle around a boss that's standing at the center of an arena, and as much as rotational kinematics simply fascinates me, the hypnotic movement is putting me to sleep. So why haven't I trashed this game already? Because boring isn't offensive. That's something we try to remember here, even if it's a little difficult sometimes. And because those interesting ideas still take tangible shape, and they're amazing even when they're still at the mercy of loose controls and repetitive combat. These are the stealth segments with Spider-Man Noir that use the cover of darkness as an actual mechanic. This is Ultimate's fight against Deadpool, which takes place inside 3 little sandboxes where the web swinging really shines. It's those first 4 levels. It's the boss fight against Mysterio at the end that tries to incorporate all 4 Spider-Mans. It's the great performances by the voice actors and the writing.
Impressive, isn't it? What do you mean, meh?
I've seen one of these before.
No, you haven't.
I have. I totally have.
It's a condensed matter reactor, the only one in existence.
Is that what it is? Oh.
This game has so much going for it that despite how safe most of it is, it doesn't fall to pieces. It's a little cracked, some would say shattered, and scattered, across dimensions even. But its 2099 problems are ultimately held up by a web of amazing moments and noir, a bitch ain't one. Shit, this is the part where I'm supposed to talk about what I learned.
Great power comes with great responsibility.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's obviously not going to cut it, but how about this? Not everything has to be walked away from with new wisdom or a deep cerebral understanding of the human condition. A little levity in your life is good. That's something Spider-Man's always taught us. You don't have to take everything so seriously. And that definitely doesn't change when you're playing video games. In many aspects, being able to enjoy something or someone even with parts of them that you don't like is its own wisdom. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions has a lot wrong with it, but its good qualities are strong enough that I'm okay with that. It's rough, it's repetitive, but it's still fun.
And that's all the time we have today. Until next time, my name's GC. Remember that you are amazing, and keep on playing positive.